It's the backstory of the Cowboys analytics department. They were way ahead of the curve with analytics in the early 2010s, ready to pick up the tradition that Gil Brandt and the guys had set long ago when they brought the first computer into scouting. They were about to take that and into the next era. But something got in the way. We'll have that story and the outlook right now when it comes to using analytics to improve your personnel department and your in-game management. Where are the Cowboys? How confident should we be at this crucial piece of the current picture for being good in the NFL? Yeah, we go back to our friends at Blogging the Boys for this. David Howman with the story.
David does an awesome job.
So Tom Robinson was their analytics czar, and he was a league trend center about 14 years ago. There were only 5 of him in the entire league in 2010. The Cowboys had 1, and they were excited about leading the way, as I just set up. And, where did things go wrong? Well, where did most things go wrong between 2010 and 2020, guys?
JG's?
Yeah. Garrett's in year 3.
Oh, no. Even like this.
Will McClay had just been elevated. It was after the Travis Frederick draft. Their process was bad. The result was good. They ended up choosing Trav over Sharif Floyd. But after that draft, they needed to make a move, and they elevated Will McClay to bring the coaching staff, the front office, and the scouts all together on the same page on draft day and sort of give them a point man here. And Will McClay's done a hell of a job with that. And he did a hell of a job instantly working with Tom Robinson, implementing analytics into their personnel decisions, because there's a lot of stuff that the naked eye just can't tell. And when you get that hard, unfiltered data, unbiased data, it can change your evaluations. And it's been a big reason the Cowboys have been so successful in the Will McClay era. Jay Jeezy was not as open to it when it came to in-game management. Wasn't totally against it, but as one source in this story says, is Jason only wanted it on his terms. Analytics for stuff that he was specifically interested in for this game, or maybe analytics that confirmed his own way of looking at things. Oh, yeah, of course I do it like this because that's what the analytics say. If the analytics disagreed, he would say it's nerd stuff. All right, so there's Jay Jeezy for you.
These people don't know football. It's weird because you'd think he'd be more open-minded being a Princeton guy to some of these numbers.
Do you think he called them data freaks like Mad Doggy does?
Data freaks. These data freaks, boy.
You wouldn't know a player if he sat on you.
Another character in this story is Adam Vonderhaar, who worked alongside Robinson from 2019 to 2022 as a football research analyst and now serves as the director of football analytics at Sumer Sports. He opened up about how receptive Garrett was to the analytical work that he and Robinson would present. So we're giving you the backstory here, but also talking about how good should we feel about where the Cowboys analytics are. I think probably Eric can tell us how good they were when it came to, in-game management stuff last year. Vonderhaar says, I think it depended on what it was. If I'm telling Jason Garrett what kind of plays he should be calling as the nerd guy, why would he listen to me anyway? So that's part of it. But I know for a fact that there were studies that we did where he would come to us and say, hey, I'm trying to decide how we should go about this. I know one, for example, was 4th and 1. And he was like, should we hand it off to Zeke or should Dak be sneaking it? And that was like a whole study we did for him, and he took that to heart. So we give him this whole report on the deal, and the next game, Dak had 2 or 3 QB sneaks, and they all converted. So that's on JG's positive side of the ledger. David Howman, Blogging the Boys, did a nice job of balancing it, not necessarily slamming Jason Garrett, gave an accurate portrayal of what it was. And he was much more receptive to stuff. It just depended on what it was. I think the 4th down stuff, maybe less so. So that's kind of where it got wrong for Jason Garrett, and was maybe one of the biggest screaming reasons from the mountaintops that he had to go when he did. Okay, then they say, as we detailed in the first part, McCarthy came in with a very specific plan for a robust analytics department, and this was one of several selling points for Jerry Jones. The sudden onset of the pandemic halted those hiring efforts, but McCarthy already had an analytics department that consisted of Robinson, Vonderhaar, and Alok Patani, a data science developer at Google who does consulting work for the team. And I think overall that's a good sign. Vonderhaar described McCarthy hire as, quote, really exciting because it was like everyone was kind of starting fresh. There were definitely some reports from the Garrett era, and there were coaches that were still around, but they came in with a big wish list of stuff, which was exciting for us because it's like, okay, cool, let's start doing this stuff. And, just puts a big spotlight on how disappointing that Garrett era was and how many different things from the play design to the analytics that were just so maddening in the final 3 or 4 years. And, frankly, it's the biggest reason in here. As I'm reminded, it's still the Jones boys in charge, and they were okay with letting Garrett do that. Like everything was fine, All this stuff was obvious by the time we got to 3 and 4 years from Garrett's eventual dismissal. It had become obvious to even the most green of blogger that cared to spend 30 minutes researching it that the Cowboys were way behind in this stuff. So the good news is you got McCarthy. What happened? What has happened since then? Despite the excitement, McCarthy's first season in Dallas went poorly. Though injuries played a large role in that, once the season concluded, attention once again shifted to the proposition of expanding the analytics department. But while changes to the coaching staff were made on expansion in the analytics department never happened. It's unclear whether or not the team made actual attempts to hire others into the department under Robinson, but the stagnation served as an early point of contention for McCarthy. So McCarthy wanted more. Wanted an overhaul after season 1. Team's kind of dragging its feet. Brian would tell you, if he was here, things can move slow over there.
Sure.
And for a small family business, they definitely run like a corporation when it comes to the speed at which they're capable of making decisions. According to a current football operations staffer in the organization, the Cowboys had earned a negative reputation for their analytics department at that point. Garrett was seen as a coach who only wanted reports that backed up his perceived notions, and the size of the department remained steady even as other teams rapidly expanded. Robinson and von der Haar were frequently tasked with generating reports or studies and then later given more time-sensitive tasks that kept them from ever finishing what they had started on. So it was hard for them to get momentum on projects. You won't meet a single soul who doesn't think Tom Robinson's a genius. He gets this stuff like nobody else, but not everyone is cut out to be a leader. And this is where the story turns to maybe Robinson had a significant role in bleeping some of this stuff up as well. Ooh. And he was here for a while, okay? Like a decade. He said, we've had a few scouts come through here that are great talent evaluators, but they never got a scouting coordinator job, or they do and they end up getting fired because it's one thing to scout and a whole other thing to coordinate other scouts. I think Tommy's one of the best analytics guy out there, but he didn't have the organization skills to hack it. Von der Haar refutes the detail about Robinson, but said they were, really good friends and remain so to this day. Fair or not, Robinson's analytics department became difficult to recruit for. The perception from the outside was that it was a high-pressure situation with little payoff, and it led to a decline in interest for other analytics staffers to come to Dallas. Inside the building, there was a growing belief that the lack of organization and consistency from the department was the missing piece to McCarthy's overarching football plan and often resulted in the team lacking key parts in the preparation phase for some games. While the team had once felt okay with the trade-off, von der Haar mentioned things changed with McCarthy's heavier lean on his analytics department. And with that change came the decision to part ways with Robinson shortly after the 2022 season concluded. Like most of these decisions in the NFL, it was a sensitive parting of ways that wasn't all that amicable, especially given some of the assumptions that were levied against Robinson. That said, even Robinson's harshest critics during his time in Dallas insist that he's a good guy with a bright future. And regardless of how things went down with that split, the Cowboys found themselves looking to hire a new head of their analytics department, and with it, an aggressive expansion of a department that had remained dormant for far too long. Now, that's in the past. We are a year into this new approach, and the new approach is cool, Wolchuk. What they've done is taken this guy, Ryan Feder, who was in Green Bay working for the head of analytics for the Packers for almost McCarthy's entire tenure. His right-hand man was this dude, Feder. Feder now works as a member of the coaching staff and is in charge of communicating the message from the coaching staff into the analytics department. Instead of nerds,
yes,
like saying, hey guys, would you like to meet about the football team? You actually have an analytics guy on staff who is trained as a traditional numbers dude.
Which is brilliant. So now you're getting everybody on the same page. I remember that from the Athletic article we used talking about McCarthy and kind of his fingerprints and some of the changes that he's made. So now you're kind of having everything aligned instead of there being a break in everything. Like, this is your department. Now they're all crossover here. Mm-hmm. It's good. It's kind of like the cross the hall stuff that they do during the bye weeks.
Indeed. I think it's something to be bullish about with this football team. How do they score overall this year, Eric?
I mean, I think they scored, like, McCarthy's always having game management issues, and some of that isn't necessarily to the analytics I mean, I guess to some extent it is, but so much of it is when he's calling the timeouts and all the different ways of should you punt, and the kicking stuff is always we look to the analytics on that, and I still don't know exactly what their process is of, like, him making the decision in the moment, or how many people are, like, in his ear telling him what to do. I think he's definitely better than Garrett was in terms of being more aggressive at times, but he botches things plenty, but all these coaches do. So I think by and large he's just okay. You'd never really fully trust him when it comes to the end of game management. You're throwing the ball when you should have ran it. You know, it's the Seahawks game, I think, where they win despite the things that his decisions should have lost you that game, and anybody would tell you that, but you ended up winning, so we didn't really have to hash it out too much. But there's always that with him. But he is more aggressive than Jason Garrett for the most part, so I think that's something that we appreciate. Like, he's willing to go for it on fourth down.
Yeah, I think the easy thing is fourth down, and then I think the hardest thing to get right for these coaches is what is the optimal early down pass percentage? How are we doing there? Because that was maddening for Jason Garrett. Was he would predictably run constantly on first down,
right?
And he would run almost the same play every time. Like, variety of play and variety of what you do on down to keep the defense guessing as much as possible is a huge component here. That's what I want my coaches asking my analytics department. Like, how predictable are we when we get in these alignments? Because we want the defense to legit be 50-50 every time.
Yeah, and Kellen Moore was another example of predictability and early down running the football guaranteed. Mm-hmm. And that was broken down pretty good last offseason after Kellen Moore moves on from the Cowboys. There was so many different articles that were out that illustrated that. So that was a huge nightmare. McCarthy's definitely better at being more willing to throw the ball early and often, but he still gets into these ruts at times through the course of a game or a season where you're going, including the Packers game, where you're not getting anything going in the run game, and still, here's a first down handoff, here's a second down handoff. Not as bad as Kellen Moore, not as bad as Jason Garrett, Scott Linehan, but he still has moments throughout the season where you're going, how are you falling back into this?
It's sickening, especially when it's so inefficient. You know?
Yeah, and you're like, dude, why
the second and long?
Why are you living for second and 10, second and 9? And there were stretches, that 6-week stretch after the bye week, it felt like he was hitting all the right notes and everything was working. And then as the season went on, it was like, okay, are you falling back into this? And then the Green Bay game was a huge example of it.